as I can be. Organic evolution. Why they call it organic evolution? It is because of the fossil records. They found these fossils, and a lot of this theory is based on the fossil records. So, and those fossil records are, I will tell you where they are, those fossil records. And they are in the rocks, or they are saps of the trees, or they are frozen 3 ways. And they are organic molecules. You and I are made up of organic molecules. And you know what organic means. Organic, any molecule, any compound that has carbon attached to it, carbon to hydrogen attached to it, like carbon dioxide is not organic. Amir, it has carbon. Carbon monoxide is not organic. They are inorganic molecules. Organic molecules are molecules that have carbon, they must have carbon, and of course attach hydrogen to it. Other things can attach to it, to nitrogen, so on and so forth. So methane, for example, right now we are smelling it in the lab. It's an organic molecule. Okay, so that's the definition of organic molecule. Okay, again, as I said, this is a trilobite, right? We talked about this in the past. It's a fossil record. So a lot of evolution, what Darwin based his observations, his theory, he made observations of, he traveled all around the world, a voyage of Beagle, and of course he had some fossil records to study them, and then of course he based it on that. Let's go. It's an interesting story in science always, who's supposed to get the credit for it. I don't know the structure of DNA. You all know who discovered DNA, Watson and Crick. But there was a lady involved, Franklin and Watson. And they say, well, I'm being recorded and putting on YouTube. Somebody might want to shoot me. But it says that Watson and Crick actually stole the findings of Franklin. Wallace and Darwin, almost somebody can say the same story. Darwin was younger than Wallace. Wallace was older. They both find the same thing at the same time. But I guess Wallace, since he was older, he had a bigger heart. He said, okay, Darwin, you proposed this. You get credit for it. And of course, Darwin is more famous now than Wallace. If you ask little kids, I asked my daughter, do you know Darwin? You guys met her. She said, yeah, I know who's Darwin. And then I asked her, who's Wallace? She didn't know. Okay, so, but it seems like it. I don't know. You have to read. This guy, Wallace, he found it first. He told Darwin, and Darwin published it before Wallace. And of course, Wallace did not go crazy. But anyhow, I don't know. Read the story a little bit about it. When I read it, it's just like Watson and Crick type of story. Lamarck, before Darwin, all the way from Aristotle, they talked about evolution. But Lamarck was the first guy who kind of put it in a sense that it made sense a little bit. Okay, so everybody believed about evolution up to Darwin, what Lamarck said. So what did Lamarck say? Lamarck said the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Use it or lose it. That's what Lamarck said. Use and disuse of evolution. Organism strives to meet demands of the environment. Giraffe, and I'll show you some pictures or will come up. The giraffe found the food on the top of the tree, so the neck became elongated, and that's what Lamarck was proposing, Lamarck said. Okay. And then acquired adaptation individually and passed them on to the offspring, to the next generation. Individual organism transformed. That's what Lamarck was emphasizing on. The word transform a lot. And Darwin came and said, no, it's not transformation. It's a variety of things. That's what Darwin proposed. The characteristics to produce evolution. Of course, it's not accepted nowadays what Lamarck said. And Lamarckism, they call it Lamarckism right there. Not accepted now due to the genetics studies showing that acquired traits are not passed to offsprings all the time. Okay. The classic Lamarck's examples was the giraffe as it evolved the long neck because of blah, 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 the food was on top of. Over many generations, these changes accumulated to produce long necks and so on. Many people still believe this, and unsupported idea that, and confuse it with Darwin's natural selection idea, which I will go over that in a minute. Darwin's versus Lamarckism, important to know for your final. Darwin differs from Lamarck, what Darwin said, in being variational. What I mean variational, it means Darwin said there are 5 things that I will go over 5 things that Darwin proposed as far as opposing Lamarck. As I said, everybody believed in evolution up to Darwin, what Lamarck has proposed. Okay, then Darwin came and proposed a new natural selection. What Darwin, I'm going to summarize what Darwin said in 2 words: natural selection. And what Darwin said from then on, that most people, most authorities, most scientists are believing in what Darwin said, and they are separating themselves from Lamarck. And what Lamarck said is transformation. What Darwin said is a variety of things, variational. It's not just transforming the trait. I hope for the rest of the lecture I'm going to use that a lot. Trait. My trait is to have black hair. Some people have blonde hair. Okay, that's my trait. My phenotype. Phenotype is the trait, for example. Okay, evolution occurs in a population and not at an organismal level. That's what Darwin proposed. Darwin said evolution occurs in a population. It's just not one individual transforming it to the next individual to the next individual. And that's what Lamarck said. Lamarck said, okay, it's me transforming it to my offspring, and my offspring transforming it to the next offspring. Darwin said, no, it's not individual-based, it's a population-based. The population, and that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the lecture. I'm going to talk about population genetics, and of course, Darwin did not know anything about genetics. Population is transforming it to the next population, giving it to the next population. That's what another main difference. Evolutionary changes is caused by differential survival and reproduction. I will talk about that among organisms with advantageous traits. I said that traits, phenotype, black hair, survival of the fittest. And that's what Darwin proposed, and Lamarck did not say that. Darwin proposed that the fittest one that survived. The other ones that are not fit for the environment, okay, they will die. Okay, and Darwin and Lamarck did not say that. Lamarckism, Lamarck did not. Desirable traits. If I have black hair, it's a desirable thing, for example, for my environment. Then I slowly accumulate those desirable traits and pass it on to the next generation. And then gradualism is another thing Darwin proposed, and I will go over that. Darwin proposed, which nowadays is being discredited, what Darwin said. But anyhow, not everything Darwin said is. Okay, a few things you should know about Darwin. He went around the world by, he graduated from England, University of London, with a degree in natural, he was a naturalist, not a biologist. Nature, they offer that degree right now in different universities around the place. But again, he was lucky to get that on a voyage from Royal Navy, so he went around, and one of the places he went and collected a lot of data was Galapagos Islands. You guys heard of that? He was born from 1809 to, he lived until 1882, and then the first credible explanation of evolutionary changes. And since then, it has not been challenged. It has been modified, and I will talk about that. But the Darwin theory of evolution has not been challenged, but it has been modified since he proposed it, and I will go over that. Made extensive collections. Of course, he went around the world, he made collections. And 5 years of voyage, he went, and then that was the Beagle voyage. And of course, The Origin of Species was his book. The name of his book, it's somewhere in your book, The Origin of Species. And he talks about it. Okay, the 5 main ideas of what Darwin said. The 5 of them. And I will go over this again in another slide to make interpretation, to analyze it a little bit more. But the 5 main big ideas he went over. 1, members of a population have heritable variations. It means you and I, in this population, in this classroom population, we are varied genetically. Darwin noticed, Darwin did not know anything about genetics, but he knew that there is a variation, genetic variation among species in a population. In this classroom, we have a population. A population, the best definition I have a population for organisms that can breed among themselves. Well, there are exceptions. In biology, it's not always black and white, but we can breed among ourselves in this classroom. So we have a population here, okay? And we can have an offspring similar to ourselves. That's the definition of population. But anyhow, in a population, more individuals are produced each generation that can survive or reproduce. And that's true, but not all of them will survive. Each generation makes more eggs, more embryo, but not necessarily all of them will survive. Okay? In case of human, if you look at the population of the earth of human, we are constant. The population of the human over the history, it was same. It never changed. It went up a little bit, but after the Industrial Revolution, the population of human went exponentially high. It's just because of the medicine is getting better, we are getting better as far as figuring out the diseases and not letting our offspring die. Okay, so it's different. For human, it's different, and then eventually, based on Darwin, we will extinct also at one time. We will, based on what Darwin is saying. Okay, anyhow. Some individuals have adaptive characteristics, some have adaptive characteristics that enable them to survive and reproduce better than the other individuals. If I can run faster, possibly from a tiger, I used that example at the beginning of semester, based on genetic traits, and Darwin said that based on the genes, based on the inheritance, he did not know anything about genes, based on our chromosomes. He did not know anything about chromosomes or genes or anything like that. And he said, based on some of my favor, if I can run fast from a tiger, then I can pass on that gene to my offspring, and maybe my offspring can run faster as well. That's pretty much what that means. An increasing population, an increasing proportion of individuals in a succeeding generation have adapted characteristics due to the genetic inheritance of that trait. 5, last one, the results of natural selection is a population adapted to it. Okay, this term, natural selection, is pretty much, good morning, sir, come on in.
Gas smell?
Yeah, do you smell it? Or